The Pappenheimer case in Bavaria, Germany, centered around the unfortunate Pappenheimer family who were tried, tortured, and executed for witchcraft in the 1600s. The family were forced to name accomplices under torture, as well as confessing to unspeakable and completely unsubstantiated, unsolved crimes committed years back. They were treated as scapegoats via a show trial, with the goal being to display extreme torture, intended to deter the public from crime. Their trial was one of the most well-publicized trials in German history. The family came from Swabia and consisted of Paulus and Anna and their 3 sons, Michael, Gumprecht and 10-year-old Hansel. They supported themselves by emptying outhouses from various towns and villages, as well as digging graves, which at this time belonged to the very lowest of professions. They also begged in the streets during the coldest months of the year, when the earth was too difficult to excavate. The act of begging was carefully regulated in most jurisdictions in Germany. Generally, permits to beg were given to the town's own indigent population who fit the category of deserving poor. At this time, the government in Bavaria conducted a campaign against vagrants and criminals, who mostly fell under the classification of deserving poor. An arrested thief, who may have had a grudge against the father, Paulus, made up a story about the 2 adult sons of the family, Michael and Gumprecht, as accomplices in the murder of 7 pregnant women. He also added that the whole family were robbers and murderers. In February of 1600, the family was arrested in the middle of the night, taken from their beds and straight to jail. Initially, only the adults of the family was arrested, and the 10-year-old Hansel was left with their landlord who, shortly after, brought him to his parents in jail. They were tortured to confess a great number of crimes. Among them were the confession that they had murdered pregnant women to secure the hands of their unborn children for use in witchcraft. Since the whole family had little to no education, the father being barely able to read, they did not resist the assertions and assault of their captors. A leading official in the family's trial was the Duke's Chancellor, Johann Sigismund Wagnerecht, who had long made unsuccessful attempts to promote witch trials in Bavaria. But it was currently uncommon in the region, because of the general opposition among the elite who were literary and educated. Nevertheless, Chancellor Wagnerecht conducted several interrogations of the family by use of severe torture. A main concern of Wagnerecht was the charge that the Pappenheimers had murdered children to grind their hands to a powder they could eat, which would give them magical powers and help them in their murders and robberies. It appears that the Duke's government wished to make an example of the family in a period of many vagrant crimes, which the government had been unable to solve. Witchcraft was a crime and which could include many other crimes, and made it useful as a general charge in a show trial toward scapegoats. Hansel was tortured first because he, as a child, was expected to break easily, implicating whoever the authorities wanted him to implicate. Due to his age, he was only beaten with a cane. The adult members of the family were brutalized with the strappado. This method involved securing the wrists with a rope, and then made to fall from a height almost to the ground, before being stopped abruptly so that it would break their arms and shoulders. Other methods included skin grinding and localized burnings with a torch. During the first round of tortures, they denied the charges. But subsequent and more severe torment resulted in them confessing to anything they were accused of. According to court documents, they confessed to sexual intercourse with the devil, promising to aid him in exchange for money and possessions. They made the pact by giving the devil hair from their head, armpit and private parts, as well as a piece of nail from the toe of their left foot, and the powder made from the grounds of unborn children's hands. Then the devil scratched them to draw blood, which he collected in a little box, took out a sheet of paper, and put a pen into their hand for them to sign. Because they were illiterate, he guided their hands as they wrote. Then he wrapped up in the paper all the things that they had given him, and took them with him. During prolonged torture, they were made to confess to almost every unsolved major and minor crime of the last decade. Their false and absurd confessions were as follows. The father, Paulus, confessed to have had entered the cellars of innkeepers and other folk, shamelessly devouring such foods and drinks that he could lay his hands on. He had further confessed to having committed 10 robberies from churches, violently slain persons by his hand alone, set fire to homes or barns, broken into houses by night, pillaging and robbing the tenants, robbed wayfarers on the highway, and committed 4 other thefts. The elder of her 2 sons, Gumprecht, has caused the death of 30 children and adults by means of sorcery. He burgled and robbed churches, committed murders, set fire to 9 homes, and caused strife between God-fearing spouses on 4 occasions. The other son, Mikhail, aged 21 years, has slain 65 infants and 5 adults by sorcery. He has entered homes and committed thefts from churches, has put to death and murdered 33 persons by his own hand. He has set fires, committed 4 other thefts, caused 10 gales and hailstorms, poisoned fields and beasts. The mother, Anna, despite being 60 years of age, has attacked 100 infants and 19 old people with her spells, crippling them and killing them in godless fashion. She summoned 4 hailstorms and windstorms, and has poisoned meadows and afflicted cattle. After the first trial, they were then tortured to name accomplices. This resulted in the implication of over 400 other people, including people who did not appear to exist. At the end of the trials, the 4 adults of the family were all sentenced to death. Hansel, being 10 years old, was not sentenced to death, but Chancellor Wagnerecht ordered that he should be made to attend his family's execution and watch them die. Prior to the execution, all family members were branded with red-hot tongs 6 times. In a highly unusual punishment, the mother's breasts were cut from her body, and the severed breasts were rubbed around the mouths of her 2 sons. At the place of execution, the males had their arms broken on the wheel. The father was then executed by impalement, a sharp stake inserted into his anus and through his intestines, a punishment typically no longer used at this point in Germany. The amount of physical and mental torment their bodies went through, and at such a short amount of time, led to them being in a numbed state of near paralysis and unable to speak, let alone comprehend what was going on. Hours later, when they could no longer be tortured without killing them, they were set ablaze to die. Normally in Bavaria, the execution by burning was performed by first strangling the condemned in an act of clemency, but the law made provision for burning people alive if it was deemed necessary for religious purposes as a deterrent. According to the sheriff, who had the youngest son in his custody to watch the executions, the boy burst into heartrending cries, shouting, "My mother is squirming, my mother is squirming." Following the execution, the young Hansel was rebaptized and renamed Cyprian. Despite this, he was still sentenced to death. He was condemned for having performed 8 murders on his own, despite being only 7 years old when the crimes were supposed to have taken place. On the fateful day, he was first strangled, and then his corpse was burned just like his family. After the Pappenheimers' death, the courts focused on the people they had falsely accused under torture as their supposed accomplices. 6 additional people, 2 men and 3 women, a mother and her daughters, were condemned to be burned for witchcraft, after having been tortured to confess and name even more accomplices. On November 26, 1600, the execution of the 10-year-old Hansel and the 5 other condemned took place in Munich. Chancellor Wagnerecht wished to continue the witch hunt by arresting those named during the second round of tortures. However, some Bavarian lawyers and officials questioned if it was legally justified to subject anyone to torture after a denunciation made under torture. Furthermore, the people denounced were of higher social position, with the knowledge, contacts and ability to defend themselves. The government hurriedly issued a spate of pamphlets, allegedly proving their case against the Pappenheimers to wash their hands, and then dropped the matter. In this situation, the Duke ordered a stop to the witch hunt, referring to irregularities in the legal procedure. However, no one was punished, and Wagnerecht continued to have a successful career in government hierarchy. In its aftermath, the Pappenheimer case became infamous in contemporary Europe. It was widely publicized throughout Germany as one of its darkest moments in history.